Welcome to Perusing's Appraisers on Purpose podcast. Our podcast showcases inspiring appraisers and professionals from the industry who are leaders in their field. How did they get to where they are? What have they learned along the way? What can we learn from them? Your host is real estate investor, entrepreneur, and appraiser, Michael Hobbs.
Well, welcome everybody. Thanks for joining us for another informative, engaging, and enlightening episode of Perusing's Appraisers on Purpose podcast. I'm Michael Hobbs. I'm your host. I'm excited to have an amazing peer and guest. They're all amazing. Some are just more amazing than others, if that was even possible, but today's the case. And because you get to be with us today, all I'm asking in return is you do what only you can do, and that is go ahead and subscribe to the podcast because you send the signal that this is valuable, this matters, this is something of value to you. So thanks for doing that. Thanks for sharing. Appreciate the generosity. It's always great to meet virtually or in person those that, just appreciate the opportunity to hear from peers. And of course, like this episode, which you will. There's no way that you won't, especially with Lee joining us. Lee, thanks for joining us, buddy. I appreciate it.
Hey, I appreciate the opportunity.
That is absolutely wonderful. So excited. I mean, you've had such an amazing and interesting career, but like all of us, we all came into the world somewhere. So Lee, were you born this way or how'd you get into the appraisal and valuation profession? Where does the origin start?
I don't think I've ever met anybody that graduated high school or college said, yeah, I want to be an appraiser, except maybe for those that were raised in an appraisal family, maybe Telford, who was raised, and he was one of your guests early. One of the few guys I've met that says, hey, I really want to be an appraiser. And he's damn good at it. I came to this a little bit differently. My original career was I got a really low draft number and ended up joining the Navy and what's in their nuclear engineering program, became a nuclear.
Yeah, fascinating.
So I've always had that data analytical engineering kind of brain.
Lee, can I ask you? I've heard so many of these stories from my family members. I just don't remember. You have the low draft number. So did they provide you, or were you subjected to some type of testing to get to nuclear subs? Because my recollection is, they don't let people like me on places like that.
Yeah. So actually it started in high school. I graduated when I was 17. But I went down knowing I was in the middle of the Vietnam War. I went down and took all the entrance tests for all the different services, right? So I already had pre-qualification set up for each one of the services. And like qualified, I was on a, whatever they call it today, the advanced, I already had calculus and algebra and the sciences. So I qualified for the nuclear engineering program. And I looked at the Vietnam War, and this was 71. And I'm going, I don't know how long this is going to go. I want to serve my country, but I'm not sure I want to be in the jungles doing it. And so this program was a 6+ year program. And it kind of replaced me going to college. So I started college, got my draft number, joined, and spent the next 6.5 years in the nuclear engineering submarine program, operate nuke power plants in places I shouldn't be. Yeah.
Oh my goodness. Well, first of all, as I always share with my relatives and my loved ones, thank you for your service. I really appreciate it.
It was forced, but I really wanted to serve my country and
appreciate that. Yeah, appreciate that. Wow. So you get to spend more than half a decade in that environment. And then what, you didn't stay. I didn't see you in an officer and a gentleman or a few good men, or maybe they portrayed you and I didn't know it was you.
No, I was lucky enough to meet the love of my life in high school and married her right out of high school. So I spent this whole time with a bride. And when it came time to go to OCS or continue enlisted, we made the choice to leave the military. So I came out of the military and did a stint I got my C-36 license, my C-10 license for contracting. I did that for a year or so. And then went into industrial and manufacturing engineering for a stint of about 4 years, developed a couple of patents and process effluent flows, things along those lines, machine patents. Yeah. But my wife, my bride, was always into real estate. Her dad was a real estate developer.
Oh, really?
Yeah. She spent time as in escrow, title, and then and real estate sales as a broker. And then in 81, we had our first child. And about the same time, I wrecked an offshore racing boat and laid myself up for a year or so. So we decided to start a real estate appraisal business. And so I ran the business side of it and did all, as we talked about earlier, built the computers and did the programming. And I actually had better equipment than my clients at the time, like B of A and Countrywide and those guys.
Yeah.
So, yeah. So again, on the technology end.
That's amazing. So you said you had an offshore racing accident that laid you up for a year. So how fast were you going on the water?
Yeah, that was about it was in excess of 100. So probably we actually clocked the boat at 120 miles an hour in one speed contest. And it was in the sport class. We were mostly doing marathon ski boat racing around Catalina Island and the big lakes and things like that. And we got a bare hull and built our own boats and all of our own running gear at the time, being a high school partner and buddy of mine.
How cool is that?
Yeah.
That's amazing. Oh my gosh. Well, and how fortunate that you survived.
Yeah, you don't normally die in those. You normally just get really hurt. So yeah. So that morphed into, how about if you quit home savings and we start an appraisal business together and I'll run the business end of it.
I mean, if your dad was a developer and she was in title and sales, why would you get into appraisal if you can be in sales?
Well, it was who she is. She was a real estate broker. She liked that end of it. She was doing walking tours of Venice and the canals at the time, and she having the first child, that's a 24/7 job, right? 7 days a week. So decided to go to work for a home savings bank and an appraiser because it would be less work. And then we started our own business thinking that would be even less, time constrained work. And of course that turns into 24/7 as well. So as we all found out in the fee appraisal business. So we did that until the mid 90s, had a small shop. Yeah. And mostly concentrated on, we're in an ag county. So the ag end of the business, corporate relocation, and some litigation support work. And then, of course, it really slowed down in the mid 90s. So actually, it was American Savings Bank was one of our clients, and they wanted Lynn to come to work for him as a district manager, but she owned the business as a woman-owned business. So she sent me instead, and I got the job. So
Oh my gosh, that's hilarious. So you were like a boy named Sue.
yeah, pretty much.
Oh my gosh.
So I went over and interviewed for district manager position at the American Savings Bank at the same time Mike Coyne interviewed. And actually, Mike Coyne got the job.
Did he really?
It's the first job I ever interviewed for and didn't get. So Mike Coyne got the job. And before I could get home, the phone rang. Lisa called me. She was in another district office. And she says, "Hey, how would you like to interview for a job out of this district?" So we both got hired at the same time. And so I got hired on the wholesale correspondent end of the business, and he got hired on the consumer retail side of the business. So, yeah. And then six months, less than a year later, Washington Mutual merged with us. And so they both became district managers. He was my boss for a while. I was his boss for a while. And then in about 1999, we had integrated platforms, a lot of different banks and platforms, and we were starting to use automated valuation models. And so in a reorg process, we decided, Sue Pottinger and Steve Drake at the time, that we needed a specialized business unit for alternative valuation products. So I headed that up, I think starting about 1999. And we brought AVMs in-house and in our loan processes.
Yes.
And started using that. And so I continued on with Washington Mutual Bank, testing all the AVMs, testing the underlying data sources. We even looked at building our own internal model, kind of like Countrywide did at that time. My peer over there, Kevin Hertzberg. And so we ran that up until about 04. and did another major reorg in the company. And I left with Sue Pottinger, Francois Madath, Steve Dre, Dwayne, and we started a business up out of Washington. And back Sean Telford came over to that as well. And that was American Reporting Company, which was a small provider of credit reports. And we expanded that into a regional settlement services provider with that's through title, appraisal. And I kind of ran the alternative valuation business unit for that. That lasted about a year. And then I spun AVMetrics out of that in 2005 as a state grant agent. Yeah. And so I've been testing AVM since about 1999. And to date, I was looking at the list the other day. Just since 04, 05, we've tested over 100 AVMs. And
I didn't even know that many existed ever. Much.
I know. Phenomenal. It's surprising. Well, a lot of them have been retired or consumed through consolidations. And then another large portion of that is what we call development models, right? Mm-hmm. Models that really never made it commercially, made it commercial. They were used as internal models, or they didn't quite pass the test once they, could see their comparative performance to other models, or they were version control. They went from a 2.0 to a 3.0, and they want to test the 3.0 model against the 2.0 with new data sources or new functionality. So right now we test somewhere north of 20 models that are commercially available out there.
Really?
Today, yeah.
Huh, so many interesting questions. Let me go back a little bit. So you and your wife start an appraisal business. You're running the business. So you never had to actually leave the office.
No. No, because this is pre-licensing, remember?
I know what you're saying.
Yeah. So I took the society courses, the 101 course and the 201 course, which were like 10 Saturday courses. So I took those courses. That was long before online education. So driving down to Pasadena City College for 10 weekends in a row, and then out to Van Nuys Airport for the 201. Took the narrative report writing class, and all the different classes, and started appraising. What I really liked to do was I didn't like the run of the mill mortgage stuff. Give me the 25-acre farm, avocado grove, or 40-acre avocado grove kind of thing, or give me that kind of, give me the odd stuff. And so I mostly worked that so I could run race car parts. I go out to Santa Clarita, the blower shop, while I'm doing an appraisal, that kind of stuff. Yeah.
Oh, that's phenomenal. That's absolutely great. So you got, you got that experience in the atypical properties, not the nice little, hey, 3-bedroom, 1-bath, 950, 1,100 square feet kind of place.
Yeah, we're lucky enough here in Ventura County, and we kind of dip into LA County as well. So we've got a lot of custom built stuff, a lot of high-end stuff, a lot of the ranch ag type stuff. So it was across the board. I mean, we've got from the beaches of Malibu literally out to the Mojave Desert. So there's a lot of diversity in that. So, which really helped when I went to American Savings Bank WAMU as in the district spot there, because we had between 25 and 30 staff and another 200 plus contract. And at one time, I think we were putting close to 2,000, 2,500 appraisals through our district a month.
Ooh,
yeah.
A month, just in that little area.
Well, that was, good portion of LA County, all of Ventura County, and then we dipped into Santa Barbara as well. Yeah.
Okay, that's a different story. No, that makes a lot more sense, because most people don't know is LA County is, LA County? Are they the largest county in the country, I think? By population.
Yeah, maybe by housing stock.
Yeah, the housing stock. That's what it is. Right. Not geographically largest, but I believe it's LA County, and then Cook County, and then Harris County, and then Maricopa, and I can't remember what's fifth.
Yeah, there's a whole list. We actually follow housing stock as part of our testing regimes and calculations. We take a look at the percentage of the housing stock that's transferring at any given time or over time, go to a lot at median housing prices to do some of our calculations for, standardized normal distributions and setting up floors and ceilings as far as, values go and where the models perform. So we kind of stay in touch. My database guy can name every county in the United States, all 130 or 3,600 of them, and tell you what state they're in. I mean,
There's 30, I didn't know this. There's over 3,600 counties in the United States.
yeah, right about that. With that jurisdictions as well. Yeah. So,
Wow. Man, this is just all kinds of knowledge being dropped here. This is amazing.
and we normally have enough data. I should probably take a step back. So, for appraisers that are listening and don't know about AVMs other than they don't like them, and by the way, I'm still a credentialed appraiser.
Thanks for that small caveat. Just for
Yeah, there's a small caveat there. And then my wife's an appraiser as well, and she keeps it fairly well grounded. But yeah, we what we do now is we call it predictive methodology testing. Or And that resides in our model repository database. So what we do is we ask the models to value the entire U.S. residential housing stock on a monthly basis. So they predict the value of every residential property in the U.S. every month, times 20 plus models. So as you might imagine, I've been doing this for a few years. I think I'm somewhere north of 500 terabytes of data in my database, which is, a secure data center, all the rest of that. And then what we do is as properties transact. So normally somewhere around 4 to 6 million properties a year transact. We gather those up and that becomes our benchmark value after we run it through filtering processes to make sure it's an arm's length transaction, right? And then we go into our database and we look at when that property was listed, because we have the MLS for the whole US. We take a look at when that property was listed and we pull the prediction of that property from the models prior to the listing of the property. That way, the models aren't informed of either the sales transaction amount or the listing amount, right? So we get a true predictive capability of the model, right? How well they did, kind of like an appraiser on HELOC refinance. There's no MLS. You got to go out and you got to take a look at comparable databases, right? Determine what you have and use your 3 approaches to value and figure out what that property would sell for in a, open market by the definition of arm's length transaction. So that's our test benchmark data set that we run against our database. And we normally roll that up quarterly. So about 1 million properties a quarter by these models. And then we run a full statistical package on those: mean, median, absolute errors, all the standard stat stuff that most of your appraisers know about. Plus we do things like PP, price predicted error, 10%, right? Because that's kind of the rule of thumb. If it's within 10%, that's kind of based on, if you have 100 appraisers appraise a property, you're going to get a normal distribution that normally goes around 10%, right? Off of what the property would actually transact for. So that's kind of the rule of thumb there. We take a look at right tail errors, right, and left tail errors, what is commonly referred to as, overvaluation or undervaluation potential, right? The undervaluation potential is cost of loss opportunity. If you're trying to make a loan, you don't want to undervalue the property, versus the risk error on overvaluing a property reduces your margin for risk. So we produce these stat packages on all the models on a national footprint, and we can normally value between 1,500 and 1,800 counties at a very granular level, meaning we can segment by property types and price tranches or tiers, right? So we can literally tell you through our testing the most credible, most accurate and precise model on a per property basis for the entire US, right? And then we build a model preference table with that, right? So that gives you the number 1, 2, or 3 model, right, for a particular property. And depending on who you're contracted with, you can build that table to select the appropriate model for that particular property. We also add business logic to it, what we call our compliance track product. So what that does is it does a correlation between the model's self-scoring metrics, which are forecast standard deviation, or a confidence score, which is based on a confidence interval or a data suitability index. And we correlate that to these performance metrics so that a lending institution can say, hey, we need a PPE within 10%, 80% of the time. That correlates to a forecast standard deviation of 9 or less, or a confidence score of 85 or above. And that way they can meet their regulatory requirements on selecting the most appropriate valuation technique. Or what I've always said, the best thing a model can tell you is when not to use it, right? So meet those criteria, escalate, right? And move on to another valuation product and type.
So first of all, phenomenal. Obviously, you're on a nuclear submarine. Of course, you know this kind of stuff. But for like the lay people, taking a step back from where you were, because it's interesting right now, there's a lot of stats coming out about younger people actually struggling to find employment. And you look at where you're at now in your career versus where you started, because of your better half. That's how you got in and around the real estate industry. And then from there, getting an opportunity where she sent you to the interview instead of her, and then being involved in that type of environment. You mentioned, you were handling wholesale and Mike handled the consumer side of things. A lot of people actually don't know, what you were talking about. So when you say, hey, you were responsible for wholesale and he was responsible for consumer, could you share a little more about that, what that was back in American Savings Bank before he got bought by WAMO?
The market right now is tough for appraisal companies. Many companies are having a hard time getting enough work with the same marketing they used to. Is your company struggling, having a hard time getting new customers, or getting additional work from existing customers? The answer to this problem is easier than you think. Do more business with the people you already know. Over 10 years, the average U.S. appraisal firm meets over 17,000 potential customers. That's a lot of people you could be doing business with right now. But it's a big problem if you don't have a proven process to communicate with them. StoryLux turns this problem into an opportunity to grow. Our advanced AI marketing tool can rebuild your contact lists and harvest long-forgotten communications. Imagine reaching out to everyone you've ever met with just one click. For the cost of 1 or 2 appraisals a month, StoryLux helps you reconnect and market to people who already know you, like you, trust you, and want to do business with you. Act now by contacting StoryLux today to turn your business growth dreams into reality. Email appraisal@storylux.com. That is appraisal@storylux.com. And now back to part 2 of the episode.
Yeah, so there's different lending verticals and in a lending institution, and they're targeting different types of clients. So on the correspondent wholesale end of the business, you don't have a direct connection to engaging the appraisal or valuation service. Somebody else has already done that through a mortgage banker, broker, something along those lines. And they package those up and bring them to you, lending institution, to have you fund those. So on the correspondent wholesale side, what you're doing is it's actually more of a review function in there, right? Where you're taking a look at this. And so there's different ways to employ technology in that. And one of those is we had different sources, like we had a flip check model, right? It would take a look and see if the property's been flipped quickly, right? We had other risk models along those, and we had the AVMs on that side too. So if the AVM said it's plus or minus 15% of the appraised value, that went to a QA1, right? And used to do it, quality assurance person. And most of those were either going to be appraisers or already appraisers or collateral analysts, right? And so they would check the boxes. If it was outside of that tolerance, then you pulled it in for a desk review, right? To see whether you wanted to keep that or kick it out. Conversely, on the consumer retail side, you're directly engaging the appraisers, your staff or your contract staff, to go out and appraise that property, right? So that you can lend on it through those verticals. Again, you can employ AVMs there, right? Back then, you had a target value before some of the regulatory things came in. You know, to make the loan work, they need, 200,000 value or 500,000 value. And you can run an AVM, look at it and go, okay, that's got a pretty high confidence score or low forecast standard deviation, and it's within a reasonable value range. And Fannie and Freddie had 2065, 2075 forms back then, which was a short appraisal form. One was a qualitative analysis and one is a quantitative analysis, where you do a gut check on the value of the AVM, drive by the property. So it was kind of a short drive by, and check the box to see if it made sense. If it didn't, then you would escalate it to a full drive by 2055 form back in the day, or even a full appraisal, right? So the AVMs were employed for different aspects, even back then when we were doing that.
Fascinating. And so given that difference in the channels and, the fact that you were helping run your wife's business, you end up getting from a savings and loan into a large organization like Washington Mutual. Did you just immediately migrate and stay in that lane that was more data oriented than it was people management?
Well, originally it was people and process flow, right?
Mhm.
I mean, you do two main management functions, and people really like me. Yeah, yeah,
It's not a bad thing. It's true.
yeah. Engineering background. I'm a good process guy, right? So my swim lane was more of how can we make this more efficient? How can we reduce costs and turn times? How can we leverage technology coming from the nuclear engineering side? And so as we went through, I kind of gravitated more towards that and less toward to telling the loan agents that their value wasn't going to make it. Mike was really good at that. And as we adopted more and more of these specialized tools, valuation tools, it got big enough in the lending institution that they decided to create a business unit that just focused specifically on non-traditional appraisal or alternative valuation products, data systems, things along those lines. And that's kind of the direction I went, and employed a lot of the mathematics and stuff that I brought over from the nuclear engineering side to help develop those systems and deploying for the bank.
I mean, and if you kind of fast forward, so you have that experience, that amazing background, you have this, well-regarded and established business, AVMetrics, and you look at maybe someone like you, not necessarily getting a low draft number, but nonetheless being at that stage or age in life with the technology that's around today. If they're more inclined in that direction than they are to go out with a, old school tape measure or digital measuring device or tablet or what have you, like, what are the options that you see? Because you're in a very unique position compared to most that are available for people that actually really like into the data as opposed to just the value of a particular property.
That's a great question. I think, and if I was entering the profession today, I'll take a step back. First of all, the automated valuation models I've always thought of as a fourth approach to value.
Yeah.
Yeah, you've got your market approach, your income approach, your cost approach, and you have a statistical approach. And I think it's heading more and more that way. Even back in the day when we were doing a lot of relocation appraisal work, and my wife continued to do that when I went off the bank, we would always employ AVMs as part of that relocation package, knowing that the relocation company was going to use AVMs as part of their QA/QC process. We just got ahead of it, went ahead and reconciled the AVM into that package. And I think today's appraisal is going to be less taping and more data and analytics, right? More of an analyst on the collateral, right? How can you use these tools? And again, I'm old school in some fashion. I love walking up and looking at a property and going, hey, when's the last time you painted this property? Right? It was 4 years ago. And you can see this eve shift where the paint is not, knowing that you've got a structural issue, right? That's hard to replace without an on-site observation of the structures and the rest of that kind of stuff. What does it mean in the end? Maybe a little higher risk for that property or that area, right? It's a risk assessment piece of your job. But, you got to dovetail that into, the final value that you're going to give it versus, just the risk assessment. But these tools as a collateral analyst are going to solve most of what the industry refers to as cookie cutter properties, large cracks to properties where there's not a lot of differential in construction style, technique, quality, remodel, external locations. The models do a really good job of that. Sure. Right. But they don't do a really good job where there's a lot of external influence or a lot of remodeling change and the housing stock itself. So coming in, I would lean more towards the collateral analyst side of the business and be able to reconcile these tools as part of that valuation process.
Yeah, that's phenomenal. And then, there's a space you're in, which some people in the industry are very well aware of and deeply interested in. A lot of people just kind of tune out, like when your spouse is watching that TV show that you just have no interest in. And I'm not saying in any way that AVMetrics is like that, but possibly it is when you get into describing some of those things that you're thoroughly interested in. Why, and obviously, as you shared, for over, 20 years, AVMetrics has been there offering a perspective and helping provide feedback on validity and accuracy. Like for people that maybe either don't know much about AVMs or don't like AVMs, so they don't pay a lot of attention to it, why does what you do matter?
Well, yeah, how do I put this? AVMs are used. We did a study not too long ago, just not me, but the royal we, that through the life of a loan, an AVM is used 7 to 10 times through the life of a loan, right? So don't realize how often they're used in portfolio analytics, defining equity position for, we used to call it RAROC, risk adjusted rates. That's back Basel II and Basel III now, because you got to take your risk and you got to quantify it, right? So equity position is important and key. Securitization and marketing. So AVMs are in the background running on these properties all the time, right? So there's just much more use of these than you could even imagine. In fact, I was just reviewing a paper that's going to come out here in the next couple of weeks that kind of quantifies AVMs in the industry and their impact and how often they're used and what the market size is and the rest of that. So it's in the background and you don't know it, but you need to be aware of it, because even as an appraiser, you're going to be held to the standards of these AVMs that you need to have a good understanding of. I've done a lot of litigation support work that involved AVMs and whether good loans or bad loans were made, and they kind of used it as the benchmark on that stuff as well. So,
wow, yeah, that's quite the experience and the undertaking and all that goodness. The given 20 years of being in and around this space, what has changed that have literally a front row seat to, and people like me have no idea of?
well, a lot of it's been driven by the regulatory environment, right? It's when I first started this at Washington Mutual Bank and that unit, there wasn't a lot of regulations around AVMs and how they were being used, right? So it was pretty much Wild West at that time. But then there's been quite a bit of guidance over the years to, prohibit value shopping and, to do blind testing, stuff like that. Right now, they just introduced, in fact, just came into effect this October, the AVM quality control standards, which came out of the Dodd-Frank Act, and we're just now put in place, 12, 13 years later. And so that kind of codified some of the existing regulatory environment aspects of it, right? And kind of brought them in. There's 5 factors involved in that, you know, and each one of those was really being followed by the major lending institutions pretty well until the 5th factor came in. They defined the fifth factor as fair housing to ensure that models don't have algorithmic bias or data input bias into them. And that's probably the biggest change that we've seen over the last 10 years, right? So in fact, I've been working for a year on building our testing methodology around that to be able to test models to ensure that they're not promoting existing redlining or bias and that they have no disparate impact, right, as part of the lending process, right? And we've all heard and read, the articles about data appraisers being biased, this, that, and the other thing. So it's, it's I have my own opinions on that. But as far as the modeling goes, in some aspects, it's a lot easier because you're dealing with a statistical model and you can do outcomes analysis with a lot of different statistical metrics on that. But at the same time, it's a lot more complex. And so I've been working on building our testing algorithm on that for almost a year. And I don't want to get too deep into it, but if you have a standardized mean difference, which is a statistical measure that quantifies the difference between 2 groups of mean errors, right, of standard deviation, and you have a control group that's not protected, and your group that is protected, you can do a study of the different scales across there and produce an output of whether the model is treating those groups differently, right? And so, so for those that are into mathematics and statistics and data, to your earlier question, this is a great place to be, either running these models themselves with these companies or being on the receiving end and utilizing these models in a lending environment and making sure that they're performing correctly and being used correctly. So I think there's a lot of ways, and an appraiser is the perfect person to do this because they understand the different components of value and how value is measured. So I would say that's a great place to be in the lending institutions or the model builders themselves.
No, that's phenomenal. Holy smokes. So, I mean, when given how much that you see that exists and you talk about how it's really the 4th approach, Lee, how does that continue to evolve and, be of either greater awareness and use for professionals, or conversely, is it gonna, are we just gonna have digital Lee and then you're gone?
Well, I'm seeing the crossover right now. I know more and more appraisers are getting the call to reconcile an AVM through a PCR, property condition report, right? So the 2 weaknesses in an AVM is what appraisers do very well, and that's quality and condition of the subject property compared to the comparable database that you're looking at, and also supports, the other 2 approaches to value, right? And externalities. How is that property being affected by surrounding properties and uses? So those are the 2 kind of blind spots that AVMs have today. And hence that hybrid type of approach where you take the statistical aspects and then you combine them with those 2 weak spots, right? Yeah. And so I see that as a much more efficient process, right? And timing wise and cost wise, and with the grain of the profession that everybody talks about. And by the way, thank God I'm not on camera because I fit that mold. That, the young guys coming in with good statistical or mathematical or computerized education. I mean, this is a spot for them to jump right into and go, hey, I understand what standard deviation is, and I understand what confidence intervals are and the rest of that. And so I know what the AVM is trying to tell me, and I can reconcile that with what I can visually see. And I don't even mean physically see, but visually see through some of these AI generative programs and the rest of the stuff that's out there available today.
No, good enough. That's phenomenal. Oh, see, that's absolutely amazing stuff. Absolutely amazing stuff. So, given that many people probably have never heard of where you've spent the last 2 decades, who do you typically interface with that? I mean, I'm taking that you're not getting calls from appraisers in the field saying, Lee, I've got a little issue here on some data. It's got a little problem here with this.
Well, other than George Dell,
Well, we'd all love George. I mean,
you know, I actually taught a course and had it 50 state certified CE for appraisers and understanding AVMs, but that's a decade ago, right? So I truly believe that that should be part of the educational process, right? Because you're going to see more and more of these. And even if you don't see them, you're going to be reviewed by them somewhere in that process. Somebody's going to take a look at your valuation work and they're going to apply an AVM to it. And they're going to ask you questions that the AVM brought forward into comp selection, adjustment processes, the rest of that. So you need to understand what an AVM is and how it works. Now, who I talked to 20 years ago, it was the chief appraiser every time. They were in charge of the residential valuation, this, that, and the other thing. Without fail, that was the entry into the lending institutions. Talk to the chief appraiser. They wanted to be able to use these tools, QA, QC, HELOC, all the places where they work well. Then it kind of migrated to the risk department, chief risk officer, right? Because now this comes under the umbrella of risk because it's a model and it's a tool, right? So the two of those guys work together. Now, almost exclusively, it's a model risk management department, right? That takes care of all of the models for the bank. The underwriting models, the financial models, the FICO models, and this kind of comes under that. So that's who we're dealing with now. So my business has migrated from being able to communicate some pretty good mathematics and stats to appraisers, right? To collateral risk managers that had a better grasp of the overall risk to the lending institution, to now to dedicated quants, PhDs in mathematics and statistics and the rest of that. So we've gone from, like I said, a few spreadsheets and presentations to reams and reams and reams of calculation and underlying data and the rest of that, so that the model risk management people got an idea of what we're doing, how we're doing it, and how it meets their risk requirements. And so third-party vendor management is part of that, and also governance and controls, right, to meet the bank's regulatory burdens and aspects. So it's like a full array that most appraisers normally don't deal with, right? But that's where their product ends up. So
amazing. Wow, that's something else. So, as you, given the seat that you're in and kind of where you started from to what you experience now, as you look out over the next 3 to 5 years, what are you optimistic about or encouraged about as it relates to anything in and around the profession?
retirement.
Congratulations. I have never heard that from someone in this profession. That is shocking that word would even come out of your mouth. How could you ever leave something that's been such a part of you for so long?
I have other things to do.
Yes, you do, don't you?
No, I think we're going to see technology. I try to stay up. I mean, I just saw a thing this morning on quantum computing and some of the new chip development on that. And if you're not following that, you don't understand the computing capacity, especially on the mathematical end. So I think that's going to be a game changer in here. I've seen it over the last 20 years. data storage costs, the ability to store data and not overwrite it, the computations that you can do in a very, very short amount of time. And I'm not talking so much the artificial intelligence. I'm more towards the machine learning or the quantum computing. I think it's going to continue to, as we feed it more data, right? It's going to continue to get better and better, better, and drive towards that collateral analyst position, because you just don't want to be feeding the machine, right, with data. You want to be able to analyze that data and put that human piece to it that the computers don't have yet. I don't see them having for quite some time. But they'll be able to gather that data, crunch it, get it to you in any way format that you want to adjust. And that's what I see in the next 3 to 5.
That's amazing. Wow. Lee, I really appreciate you sharing that. That is absolutely fantastic. That is absolutely fantastic. And, maybe as we come to a close, and I'm a full believer that there was a time when you couldn't step away from the wall because the phone cord wasn't that long. Now we can travel the world with that connectivity, whether you want it or not. And, whether you're a big fan of Gary Vaynerchuk or not, as he likes to say, technology always wins. And, we're definitely in one of those environments at this point, this point of this century and our lives. But, I mean, what do you think? Is people going to be walking around with 3D live scan eyewear on that's talking in their ear and processing everything right in front of them, like the old RoboCop movie or the new Marvel comics or Iron Man? Are you designing that behind the scenes, Lee? Is that the future that you're creating for us, or what?
So yeah, to your point, I remember the only people that used to talk to themselves were pushing baskets down the street, and now everybody talks to themselves. That's true. So to be quite honest, I have a Starlink Mini in the sunroof of my truck, so that no matter where I'm at, I'm fully Wi-Fi'd and connected. Because, like we talked about earlier, I have a tendency to be in places where there's nobody else out in the middle of nowhere. But also, it keeps you fully connected. I can pull it over at any time and flip open my laptop and receive a report or make a comment or whatever I need to do wherever I'm at. And if I was out appraising properties today, I would have a Starlink Mini, and I would be utilizing that Wi-Fi and internet connectivity to automatically upload and download. I remember back in the day, we'd pull data, we'd go out to the subject property, take a look at it, and it had nothing to do with the data that we actually pulled. And I'd already based all my comp pulls on that, and now I'm 20 miles out of the office and nothing fits, right? Not today, right? Today, everything is instantaneous that way. So I do see those are the kind of efficiencies that you're going to build, right? Into the future, I think everybody is going to be connected so that you can upload and download reports from the property if you're out in the field, or get a hold of whoever hired you to make a decision on whether they want to upgrade this thing or drop it. I just see a lot of efficiencies built in the communication into this.
Got it. Well, Lee, I appreciate it. Thank you so much for sharing. This has absolutely been informative.
Okay, Michael. I, again, appreciate the opportunity and introducing everybody to that world behind the curtains. By the way, my property in Arizona is on Yellow Brick Road.
Oh, man, that's amazing. Yellow Brick Road. That is
my wife called me one of the doormats and said, nobody but nobody gets to see the wizard right there. So.
Oh, man, I love that. I absolutely love it. Oh, friends, what an amazing little walk down memory lane, fast forwarding into the future with Jetson style. And we give Lee all the credit for making this happen. So, Lee, I appreciate you joining us today.
Well, again, thanks for the opportunity to get everybody introduced to behind the scenes with AVMetrics and what we're doing to help the valuation appraisal profession out there.
I appreciate that. I appreciate that. Friends, as we said at the beginning, and we'll restate here at the end, do what only you can do. And thank you for subscribing. And of course, what's not to like about getting a world-class education in less than your lunch hour? So this has been wonderful. And again, until the next episode, Lee, thank you so much.
Hey, my pleasure. Thank you.
Thanks for listening to this week's episode of Appraising's Appraisers on Purpose. We hope you enjoyed learning from the amazing professional paths and achievements of our beloved guests. Before we go, please subscribe on your listening channel, Spotify, LinkedIn, YouTube, and other podcast channels to hear more from appraisers and valuers regarding their life and their work. After you drop a comment below, who is one friend and peer you can generously share this episode with? If you have any suggestions or questions for future episodes, we'd love to hear from you. Just send us a message on LinkedIn and we'll be sure to get back to you. Thanks again for listening, and until we're together again for the next session of Appraising's Appraisers on Purpose, create the change that you seek.